Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you very much for inviting me here today. It's a real privilege to be able to speak with you today. My heart got a bit of a workout then for that one, certainly. Interesting as well, the lady here was talking about information. Now, all of you value information. That's why you're here. Information works in strange ways, though. Often people will get something going on in their body. You know, some people will go and meet that head on and they'll go and see their doctor. Other people will say, actually, I don't really want to know what's going on. And even when they do go to the doctor, they say, don't tell me what's going on, just sort it out. Just figure out what's going on. Don't tell me the details, just sort it out. Okay? So how we deal with information can shape our behaviour. If information tends to make us anxious, we don't really want to know too much about the detail, we just want to know what we can do about it. For other people, they want to know every single detail about what's going on because that reassures them that there's some control in the world. Someone is actually mapping what's going on here. We can actually perhaps think about what might happen in the future. And this is the sort of situation that we find ourselves in. Each of us has a different relationship as to how we are going to process this information. Each of us has a different reaction as to how we find ourselves behaving around other people or our families. But what is common is that this is a common reaction. Everything that's going on for us physiologically right now, with our heart rates going, with us thinking about, is that a shake, is that not a shake? Am I going crazy? Does it feel like it's shaking all the time? That is a common reaction to a very uncommon situation we find ourselves in. And I'll talk a little bit about what that might feel like, and so to help you make sense of what's going on, and what it is that this gentleman was talking about, children, what it is that they may be experiencing, how it is that we may be able to extend a helping hand to our children and to our older residents in the community as well. That's roughly what I'm going to cover. We are only 6 days from the initial event last Friday. I remember what I was doing that Friday. It seems like a lot longer than 6 days ago to me. I'm sure it does for you too. To a certain extent, what we're experiencing right now, that heightened state of alert, is good for us. We are built evolutionarily to be in that state. When something is threatening our life or has the potential to threaten our life, we need all our senses on full go. We need adrenaline coursing through our bodies. We need to be ready to get up and go. So, the brain, the nervous system, your blood circulation, your muscles, as well as your mental and emotional attitudes are all attuned for this kind of a situation. What does this look like? You might have, it might be starting to wear off a little bit now, but certainly in the few seconds after that last aftershock, it's a wide awake, energized kind of feeling. It's clear thinking, you're focused upon the details. You need to take into account, how am I going to get out of this room? Where's the nearest table? What's my drop, cover and hold? Where's my kid? Do I need to be able to thinking about what they're doing? You have a feeling of readiness or even an impatience. Sometimes it's like there's not been an aftershock for a while. I want one. I want to know what's going on here. Maybe that means something. If there's no aftershock, what's going on? A reduced sense of self-awareness, a greater focus on the world around you. So sometimes you're not really aware of what you're thinking or doing. You're really focused upon your building and your surroundings. So sometimes we can neglect ourselves a little bit. We're not eating right, or suddenly we're not hungry, or we're not sleeping very regularly, or we're taking a lot of coffee in, or all sorts of different things we may be doing. At the other sense, we've got a clear sense of fatigue and safety, but often when it becomes overwhelming. So I know a few people have talked to me over the last few hours about feeling really quite tired, starting to feel like that lack of sleep over the last few nights is starting to add up. Does that sound familiar to people? Yeah? Not wanting to sit still, but wanting to do something, that feeling of agitation and restlessness. Actually doing something's quite good, because when we sit still in a situation like this, we feel like we're sensing everything that's going on around us. Every little shake is magnified. So doing something's quite good. The other thing that people often complain about is this sense of disorientation. And I know a few people from Christchurch have talked to me about this. And what that is to do with is our sense of balance. So we check our sense of balance with two systems that we have, our eyes and our inner ears, our vestibular system. The problem is that sometimes they don't match up. Sometimes our eyes are telling us the world is not moving, I don't see anything moving, but our inner ears are telling us, yes, it is moving. And we have trouble making sense of that because actually, yes, there probably is a vibration going on, but our eyes are not matching up with what our ears are telling us. We have this kind of feeling of doubt. Like my body's telling me something's going on, my heart is racing, I feel ready to do something, but my eyes are not telling me the place is shaking. That can be quite disorienting. And if that goes on for days and days and days, that actually puts quite a physiological load on your system and you can end up feeling quite tired, and some people even complain of feeling seasick, even though they're standing on solid ground. Okay, so that's something else that you may notice in your life. Often we're able to put our emotions aside, or we ask other people to put their emotions aside to deal with the current situation, so we can be a bit truncated. It's like, no, just tell me the facts. Don't want to know what you're feeling. I just want to be doing this, 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 this. We can all get a bit choppy with each other when we're in a situation like this. And we channel thinking into what needs to be done rather than what might happen, because thinking sometimes about what might happen becomes a bit scary. So we end up focusing very narrowly on what needs to be done now. And there is an advantage in doing that. All of these things are there to help us. Evolution has taught us to be and bred us to be in this way. But the problem is if this goes on for quite a long time, it starts to become a bit of a problem. If we're in this constant state of alert for days on end, then unless we take steps to look after ourselves, then we can get quite fatigued, quite snappy with people, we fail to see the big picture, and sometimes we start ducking decisions, or start thinking that things are too big, or start making some strange decisions because we're not in a really good physical state to start making or taking on information and making sense of all the things that we're getting together. Matt has talked about an incredible amount of work that's been going on at GNS and the data that's been collected. If you're feeling very tired, it's really difficult to make sense of that, and it might take a wee while. Now, this is called emergency stress threat. And it's particularly a problem where there's a lot of uncertainty about the situation, or where the emergency continues without being resolved, which is the kind of situation we find ourselves in now. What does this look like? You may not be feeling this now, but if we're continuing in this state where we're not able to sleep, we're not feeding ourselves properly, we're not able to get some respite, this is what it can look like. Loss of energy, tiredness, physical weakness, difficulties thinking clearly, making decisions, focusing on the details at the expense of the big picture, feeling fearful about meeting the crisis and wanting to avoid it, so really just parking it and saying, yeah, well, it might happen, but I'm hoping it won't happen, and then failing to take preparedness steps to make sure that you're trying to mitigate the risk that you find yourself subject to. And thinking about what might happen rather than what needs to be done. So we can get ourselves thinking a little bit wishfully about the situation we find ourselves in and discounting the risk and saying, well, actually, 30% means 70% likelihood that it's not going to happen, so we end up doing nothing. So we need to make sure that we take quite a balanced approach to that. Talked a little bit about that. Losing focus on the real situation, becoming quite preoccupied by emotions, suddenly noticing that we're feeling quite frightened, and then that determines all of our decisions. So for some people that might mean perhaps leaving for a while, and then understanding when you do go away that actually that's quite a loss in your life. That's happened in Christchurch quite a lot. A lot of people who left with the intention of staying away are actually back in Christchurch now because they realise that family, friends, their whole life is based in that city. So even though they wanted to leave because they felt frightened, there was a consequence to that, and so they ended up moving back again. They took that decision in a very tired state. I'm not going to talk too long because I'm aware of time and you've been very willing to give up your time, so I'll move along so we can get to the questions. But this idea of being preoccupied by fear, anger, blaming, irritability, feeling tearful, detached, feeling hopeless and giving up is not something that you would find after about 6 days. But if this continues for a while and you're not able to get respite or support from other people around you, then that's perhaps where the situation may move in a worst case scenario. But there are steps that you can take in order to stop yourself from ending up there, and we'll talk about that in the rest of the session. So what can you do in order to strengthen yourself, to build up your resilience in this situation? So making sure you're taking regular food and drink, taking breaks, preferably before you need them, not after you suddenly become aware that you're totally exhausted. So When you're in this emergency stress state, it's really important to stick to your routines of what you know is good for you. Don't work till you drop. It takes too long to recover. And in a small community like this, you all have incredibly important roles for each other. We can't afford for lots of people to be falling over all at once, so keep an eye out for each other. If you see somebody who's kind of looking a bit tired, let's see what we can do in order to help each other. Focusing on self-care, don't take risks. You survive best if you're unhurt. Taking emotional breaks. But this last point is the one that I want to emphasize, is that your physical energy and your emotions are tied together. Don't think about your emotional problems when you're tired, because it's going to be very difficult for you to make sense of that. So sleep first, rest first, then start making decisions, then start thinking about how you're feeling. One way that we use as humans to process when we're going through difficult situations, scary situations, is by talking. Now, a lot of people talk at their own speed and in their own way. So just because somebody is quiet, it doesn't mean that they're immune or what's going on. It's just that they're processing it in their own way, and they'll be able to reach that point at their own speed. So talking is good, but not necessarily forcing people to talk when they're not ready to talk. There's a danger in talking and focusing upon the negative too much. So if you're finding yourself talking about the negative or hanging around and thinking about problems all the time, it's a danger signal. And we know this from Christchurch. You've heard all the stuff about EQC and insurance and how that is dominating a lot of people's lives. And that's been going on for weeks, months and years for some unfortunate people and families and organisations. I'm not saying that that's going to happen here, but we're primed perhaps to be looking for things to be going wrong in that process. So we need to be making sure that, yes, there are issues that might need to be sorted out, but don't let it dominate and become the totality of what it is that you're struggling with. What I should mention is that all of this stuff that I'm talking about now, I've put out in a series of fact sheets along that back table underneath the notice boards and the awards board. Fact sheets 1 to 4 and 5, mainly around helping children, emergency stress, what it looks like, what you can do, and helping older residents. And I've got a whole series on the web as well, and I'll put up the web link for that too if you don't manage to get a copy tonight. So helping children. Children are interesting because they may not react in the way that you think they will. I know that one friend of mine said that her child who is 5 was really scared. And she assumed that she was scared about the earthquakes and what that meant for her and the earth shaking. And she couldn't figure out what was going on. But when she took a moment to find out and to understand what she thought the problem was, it was the fact that she thought her favourite teddy was going to get hurt. And she was not near her favourite teddy right now. So once she got her favourite teddy, she actually felt a lot better, because if she was okay and Teddy was with her, then Teddy would be okay too. So their world is very different to our world, and we need to take a moment to understand that. I was in a restaurant with my 2-year-old when the 6.5 hit, and she turtled onto the ground. She's 2 years old, and I turtled on top of her. She didn't mention it since then. Every now and again, I just go, "You okay?" And she's like, yeah, earth wobble, fine. And then today, she said, "Earth wobbled," to her grandma on Skype in London. Earth wobbled, earth wobbled. I did a turtle, I was great. She actually thought it was quite exciting. She thought she felt rewarded for behaving well in that situation. So sometimes we may be looking for problems where there aren't. You know, children look at the world very differently, and that's worth bearing in mind for us as adults. But what we can do is we can be real, because often what will happen is that they'll look up, and although they're feeling okay, you know what it's like with children. When they fall over and they hurt their knee, the first thing they do is look at your face. Yeah? Because they want to see what your face is doing. And if you're like, "Oh my God, are you okay?" they'll like start bursting into tears. But if you're kind of like, "Oh," brush yourself off and then get up again, they'll take your cue. So if they look around and all the adults around them are kind of screaming and running around, they'll figure out, "Oh, there's something pretty bad going on here." And so it's up to you as the adult in their world that they care about to explain to them that this is frightening for some people and they're struggling to cope, but it will be over soon. Keep updating them, explaining them what is happening in simple words so they can understand it. So if the risk is decreasing, or if you feel like they're in a dangerous situation, or you've stopped going to that particular building because you think it's a bit dangerous, they need to understand why it is that you've changed their routine. Explain what you're doing to keep them safe. Show how your knowledge helps meet the threat, because they want to know. They also want to know that you're keeping yourself safe too. Children worry about you as adults. They want to know what you're doing at work, and whether you're doing the stuff that they're doing in daycare or school around turtling and making sure that they're doing drop, cover and hold. Are you doing that at work too? Because they're worried about you, so they need to know. And get them to talk about what they think might happen, so that you can have the opportunity to correct any strange ideas they may have about the world, or things that they think are going to go wrong that actually aren't going to happen, like if they've been watching Pacific Rim or something like that. Give them things to do to help however you feel, so they feel useful, even if it's just to keep watch on particular things. And that's particularly important for adolescents. Often what can happen in disaster situations is that adolescents don't get to see their peer group. Everybody stays inside, everybody stays with the family. Whereas adolescence is the kind of period of life where family becomes less important, peer group becomes more important. So if they go into lockdown, they don't have any opportunity to discuss their experiences with the people that they would normally discuss this experience. So they might become sullen, or they might act out because they're not able to do what it is that they would normally do. So bear that in mind too, if you do have adolescents. Reassure them that they're brave, will manage well, and you are confident in them. Children are very resilient, particularly if you inspire them with the confidence that you have with them being able to get through this situation. And show them affection and courage when you can. And I understand that it's frightening for everybody in this situation, but they will take their lead from you. Again, I'm just briefly touching on a few points, and I know that I had got a tip-off that this might be raised as well. So, and I had a look actually on Statistics New Zealand, and I had a look at to look at the demographic profile in the area. So helping older people, one of the most important things that we learned from Christchurch is that medications, particularly people who have complex medication scripts, making sure that that ongoing medication is maintained. If people are finding it difficult to access things in their house, or feeling like it's impossible for them to go and return into particular areas, or it's difficult for them to get transport, these are the sorts of things we need to think about. Ensuring social connectedness. One of the things that happens is that a lot of older residents don't ask for help because they don't want to be seen as a bother or as a burden for other people, and there are other people who perhaps need assistance more than they do, so they put themselves down the bottom of the ladder. So we need to be watchful on that and make sure that we step forward and say, actually, is there something that you need? And there's a great deal of life experience to share and offer as well, so please make sure that they are positively included in any community initiatives. Often things are located in areas that are difficult to reach or difficult to get transport to because they're at times of the day or days of the week, so please bear that in mind. And the practical, informational, emotional and advocacy social support are all important, particularly advocacy. Particularly if people are having difficulty dealing with things like insurance, or dealing with banks, or dealing with institutions like that, advocacy is really, really important for older residents in those situations. What do we know? We know from the world literature and our experience in Christchurch is that the vast majority of people will have some kind of reaction in the short term. You might feel a little bit hypervigilant, you might feel quite jumpy, you might feel quite fearful about what the future will bring for a while. And particularly when we're dealing with uncertainty. So we have kind of this forecast envelope, but we can't deal in definite predictions. That's just not where we are with earthquake science, and that is hard. And we tend to struggle with those situations where we have more uncertainty. But please don't let it paralyse you from making small changes to increase your preparedness. So having your shoes by your bed, having your torch by your bed. If you have spectacles, having your spectacles glasses case stuck down with a bit of blue tack so it doesn't go riding off your bedside table when there's a quake, so you can find them, get out of the building. Those little things are going to make a difference and help increase your preparedness. Dealing with difficult stuff once you get through the difficult initial period. Sometimes it's not the right time to be dealing with that difficult stuff, but do deal with it. Do find a way of recording it. One of the things we know about adrenaline is that it's really poor for forming memories. When we're in a really heightened state, we can say, yep, must remember that, and it's gone. So write it down, because the adrenaline coursing through your body is not going to help you to remember what it is that you need to remember. And make sure you stay, you stay connected. Have good access to water, food, security, communications, and social support. Keep seeing the people who you normally see. Try not to break your routines too much. Try not to let it paralyze your life. The more you're doing the stuff that you are doing in your regular life, the better you'll be able to withstand any 4s or 5s or possible 6s that come along. So the fact sheets that are available, that's the URL. I've set up a short URL, tinyurl.com/Quake fact sheets. You'll find these 11 fact sheets. I won't read them all out. There are stuff on children, adolescents, coping personally, but also if you're working in services, there's information there for how you might best wish to set up your services and what you might need to look out for in people coming to see you. So, common reactions to an uncommon situation. If you do feel like you're struggling, or if you do feel like people who you care about or who you're connected to are struggling, please go and see your GP as your first port of call. There are other services here, other service representatives here as well who are in the room, and I think you're going to ask them to speak and make themselves known as well. But your GP is your first port of call. My email address is, sorry, I'll go back to the beginning, s.johal@massey.ac.nz. Sarb Johal, if you Google me, you'll find my contact address as well. If you want to contact me, I'm happy to route you through to the local people who could best serve your needs. It's not my place to come to your community and to offer my services uniquely to you, but it is my duty to connect you in with the people who live close to you, who are best able to help you in a sustainable way. Thank you for your attention. I'll stop there and take any questions if you have them.